For the open hood, the single father lifted a small blue plate and the heiress sank beside the car. It was only a mark in old metal, yet her face knew it carried a debt. Who decided that truth should stay hidden? The old coupe on Evan's lift gave a tired cough just as the rain started hitting harder. He had one hand on the wrench, one eye on the wall clock, feet planted in a puddle that had crept under the side door sometime after dark. The roof over the back corner had started leaking again. He had meant to patch it that weekend, he had meant to replace the cracked office window, fix the heater in the waiting room, and call the landlord about the drain that kept backing up whenever the storm got mean. Instead, he tightened the last bolt, his hands on a gray shop rag, and listened to the soft scratching of the pencils against paper from the far side of the garage. Ruby was supposed to be asleep. She sat curled on an old vinyl chair beside the parts counter, her small rain boots dangling above the concrete, her bare pressed under one arm. A coloring book lay open on her knees, though the crayon had slowed to a lazy drift. Her head dipped once, then jerked back up. "Ruby," and said without turning. "Eyes closed, I'm not tired. You just missed the page." She looked down, saw the crayon mark running off the paper, and frowned at it, like the page had betrayed her. Evan let the corner of his mouth move, just barely. He crossed to the counter, opened the old customer ledger, and wrote the coupe's owner on the next line in block letters. He still kept names by hand, the way his father had. Make, date, amount owed. No fancy system. No cloud backup. Just ink on paper. A line for every person who trusted the shop enough to come back. His father used to say a name deserved to be written where a man could see it, and capped the pen and rubbed his thumb over a smear of grease on the edge of the page. Tomorrow there would be bills. Tonight there was only the last car, the sleeping child pretending not to sleep, and the rain ticking against the metal roll-up door. Then headlights cut across the front windows. Ruby sat up. A low engine rumbled outside, uneven and angry, then choked. Tires rolled through the wet gravel. The headlights stopped just short of the bay door, shining through the rain in two pale cones. Evan watched the light hold there, waiting. "Stay in the chair," he told Ruby. She hugged the bear tighter. "Is it a customer? This hour, it's either a customer or trouble." He pulled the chain. The roll-up door rattled open, letting in a sheet of cold rain and the smell of wet pavement. Outside sat a dark blue sports car, low and polished, the kind of car that looked wrong in front of a shop like his. Its hoodline gleamed even under dirty weather. Its engine stuttered once, coughed, then died with a soft metallic shudder. The driver's door opened, and Caldwell stepped out like she had stepped into the wrong world and wanted the world to apologize for it. Her coat was wet at the shoulders. Her hair had come loose near one temple. She looked past Evan, past the oil stains, the tool chests, and old tires stacked against the wall, and fixed her attention on the empty bay. "You're open," she said, even glanced at the clock. "Not really, but you're here. That's not the same thing." Her jaw tightened. She looked back at the blue car. "I need it running now." Ruby's eyes moved from the woman to the car, then to her father. Evan could feel the child listening, even over the rain. He stepped outside far enough to look at the car without inviting Marin in. It'd die on the road. It started losing power 3 blocks back. But here, because someone at the hotel said this was the closest shop that still worked on older engines. That someone was generous. "I don't need charm. I need a mechanic." Evan looked at her then. Not at the coat, a watch on her wrist. Not at the car that cost more than his building was worth. Her voice had the hard shine of a person used to being obeyed, but underneath it was pressure. Not fear exactly. Something tighter. A deadline toward the steering wheel. "I'll guide it in." She hesitated, as if the thought of taking instructions from him had to pass through several locked doors first. Then she got back behind the wheel, as Evan pushed from the front fender with careful hands, more protective of the machine than of the woman's pride, and brought the car into the bay. The tires whispered over the damp concrete. Ruby watched from her chair, half hiding her face. Once the car was inside, Evan pulled the door down. The storm became a muffled roar beyond the metal. Marin was already reaching into her leather folder. "I have a closing tonight," she said. "Family matter. I need the car presentable and running within the hour." "Cars don't care about closings. This one does." Evan lifted his eyes. She opened the folder and pulled out a single sheet, clipped cleanly to a thicker packet beneath it. "You'll inspect it, make whatever temporary repair you need to make, and sign this. It states the failure was due to neglected maintenance by the prior shop." Nothing complicated. Evan didn't take the paper. Marin set it on the edge of his workbench anyway. "I'll pay for the rush." He looked at the paper, then at the blue car, then at Ruby. His daughter had gone very still. He hated when customers brought that kind of air into the garage, the kind that made a child understand too much without knowing any of the words. "How about I look at the engine first," he said. "I just told you what I need. Just told you how this works." Her eyes narrowed. "Mr. Whitaker, I'm not asking for charity. No one said you were. I can pay triple your night rate." Evan picked up the paper at last, not to sign it, but to read the top line. His thumb left a faint grease mark near the margin. He noticed the language first. Not a repair note. Not even a standard inspection form found. It was written like a shield for someone who already knew where the blame needed to land. He laid it back down. Marin's face hardened. "Is there a problem?" "The problem is under the hood until I know different." Statement would help me avoid unnecessary delays. It would help you say something I haven't proved. For the first time, her control slipped. Not much. Just a flicker at the corner of her mouth, quick glance toward the car, as if the blue machine had failed her twice now, once on the road and once in front of this man. Even walked to the front of the car and released the hood. It rose heavy and slow, exposing the dark, crowded engine beneath. The smell of warm metal and rainwater lifted out of it. He reached for a work light and clipped it near the frame. "Behind him," Ruby whispered. "Daddy?" "It's all right," he said, without looking back. It wasn't all right. Not exactly. Marin stood beside the workbench, with her folder still open, and that unsigned paper waiting under the fluorescent light. The money was there if he wanted it. Pressure was there if he feared it. And the car sat between them, with its hood open, quiet as a held breath, while Evan stared down at the engine. Understood that whatever she wanted him to sign had been written before he had ever touched a wrench. Even did not touch the paper again, found. He moved around the blue car with the work light in his hand, letting the silence answer Marin for him. The hood stood open between them, its underside dark with rainwater that had run in when the car came through the door. The engine looked well kept at first glance. Too well kept, maybe. Clean wires, polished housings, fresh clamps where old ones should have had a little wear. It was the kind of neatness that made a mechanic slow down and checked her watch. "You've been staring at it for 5 minutes. Then I'm 5 minutes closer than I was. I told you I'm on a schedule." Evan leaned over the fender and clipped the light lower. "Engines don't move faster because somebody's late." Her mouth pressed into a thin line. Ruby, still by the parts counter, pulled her bear higher against her chest. She had stopped pretending to color. Fears moved from her father's shoulders to Marin's wet coat, then to the paper lying on the workbench. Even saw the look and kept his voice even. "Ruby, stay back from the bay. I am, Fiat." He reached into the engine compartment and traced the harness with 2 fingers. The casing looked clean, but one section near the inner wall had been wrapped twice, tight enough that it sat thicker than the rest. He followed it down, for bracket, then stopped. That tape was newer, not brand new, not shiny, but newer than the grime around it, newer than the faded clamps holding the line in place. He glanced toward Marin, who worked on this last. He folded her arms. "A private restoration shop my family uses recently. That depends on what you call recent. I call fresh tape. Fresh tape." Something flickered across her face. Irritation first, then calculation. "Thing. They damaged it?" "I'm saying someone was in here." Marin stepped closer. "Can you make it run?" "Probably." "Then do that." Evan straightened just enough to look at her over the raised hood. "You want it running, figured me, not to notice why it stopped. For a moment, the rain on the roof seemed louder. Marin looked toward Ruby, then back at Evan. You're reading too much into a breakdown. Maybe. He did not argue further. He had learned, a long time ago, that people who came in wanting a signature before an inspection were rarely interested in the truth. He loosened a cover plate near the firewall, slow and careful, setting each screw in the same order along the edge of the workbench. The metal was warm under his fingers. The smell rising from the engine was not just old oil and rain. There was a faint scorched edge to it, something electrical and forced. Marin's heels clicked once on the concrete. How long? Long enough. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Ruby slid off the chair and came a few steps closer, still outside the bay line painted on the floor. Evan saw her reflection in the blue fender, small and pale under the shop lights. Back a little, sweetheart, she obeyed, but not far. Her bear hung from one hand now. Her eyes stayed on Marin. As if the child had heard something in the woman's breathing that the adults were trying not to name, even lifted the loosened cover. Beneath it, a narrow run of wires bent where they should have lain flat. One lead had been cut and joined, again, not poorly, but not by the original hand that built the harness. Whoever had done it knew enough to hide the change and not enough to make it belong. He held the work light closer there, seeing the wire run, wedged against the inner wall of the engine bay, was a small rectangle of metal no bigger than 2 fingers. It had been fastened under a strip of dark sealant, easy to miss unless someone had reason to peel back the work. Even did not pull it loose at once. He looked at the engine. He looked at the paper on the bench. He looked at Marin. You knew there was something under here, or it came too fast? No. Then why do you look like you're waiting for me to find it? The color left her face, not all at once, but in a slow drain. I don't know what you're talking about. The Evan picked up a small blade and cut gently through the sealant. He did not pry hard. He worked the edge free with the patience of a man who had spent half his life saving parts other people would have snapped. The little plate came loose with a soft click and dropped into his palm. It was dull blue under the grime, not painted like the car, older than that. Industrial blue, the kind used on tool tags, lockers, factory plates. Along one edge was a shallow hand-scratched mark, rough and uneven, as if someone had used a nail or the corner of a file. The marking was not a name, not clearly. More like a worker's sign, a set of letters and numbers that had been made by a shaking hand. Even rubbed the edge with his thumb. Marin made a sound behind him. Not a word. Barely even a breath. He turned. She was staring at the plate as if he had lifted something out of a grave. What is it? Ruby whispered. Even did not answer her. He was watching Marin, he assumed. The woman who had walked into his shop with a folder full of instructions and a voice sharpened by money took one step forward, then another. Her knees bent before she seemed to choose it. She crouched beside the open front of the car, the rain still dark on her coat, her hands hovering near the plate, but not touching it. Where did you get that? She asked. You watched me take it out. No. Voice broke around the word. No. Where was it exactly? Evan pointed to the open space near the firewall, tucked behind the harness. Hidden under sealant, Farron reached into her folder with unsteady fingers and pulled out a pen. For 1 second, Evan thought she meant to sign something, to take control again with ink and paper. Instead, she took the plate from his palm, laid it on the top of the fender, and circled the scratched marking with the tip of the pen without pressing hard enough to damage it. Her hand shook. Ruby stepped behind Evan now, enough that her shoulder touched the side of his leg. She was looking not at the blue car, not at the plate, but at Marin's face. She's crying, Ruby whispered. Marin heard it. She looked away, but not fast enough. The tear had slipped down one cheek, cutting clean through the rain and makeup there. She wiped it with the back of her hand and failed to make herself look angry again. Even bent back over the engine. The light still clipped low, the plate, now sitting on the fender between them, like a thing neither one of them could put back. He checked the spliced wire once more, then the place where the plate had been hidden. The car had not simply failed, and altered the line, filled in the wordwerk, and left that little piece of metal where only a careful mechanic would ever see it. "What does that mark mean?" he asked. Marin stared at the circled scratch. "I don't know." Evan did not believe her, not because she sounded false. Because she sounded wounded. He picked up the plate with a rag and turned it toward the light. Under the first marking, half buried in grime, was another shallow stamp. Full name. Not enough to prove anything, but enough to make the air in the garage tighten around him. It was a mill code. He knew the pattern. Every family on the west side of town knew some version of it. Pails. Lunch pails had carried marks like that. Toolboxes, locker tags, union paperwork. Men and women who had spent their backs inside the steel plant had used codes like names when the office stopped calling them by anything human. In a sound, Evan looked from the plate to the unsigned paper on the workbench. Then he looked at Marin. "This isn't about a bad repair," he said. She did not answer. Her eyes stayed on the little blue plate in his hand. Feel. Ruby held her bare. Tighter, and for the first time that night, the garage felt too small for the three of them. Even turned the plate once more beneath the light, following the scratched mark with his eyes. No, whose hand had made it. He did not know why it had been hidden inside a Caldwell car, but he knew enough to feel the old anger stir under his ribs. Mark belonged to the kind of people whose names had a way of disappearing from paper. By morning, the little blue plate lay wrapped in a shop rag on the passenger seat of Evan's truck. He had not slept. Neither had Marin, by the way. She stood outside the old building, with her coat buttoned wrong and her folder clutched against her ribs. The rain had stopped before dawn, but the town still looked wet and tired, the sidewalks dark, the gutters full, the old mill stacks rising beyond the rooftops like things no one wanted to talk about. Evan shut the truck door and took the rag-wrapped plate in his hand. "You're sure she'll see us?" Marin asked. "No," he said. "Sure she'll know what this is." Marin did not like that answer. He could see it in her face. She wanted certainty. She wanted signatures, schedules, papers lined up in clean folders. Fearing. Evan had worked long enough around broken machines to know that the first true thing was usually messy. Alma Reyes opened the door before he knocked a second time. She was smaller than Evan remembered, wrapped in a gray sweater, her hair pinned back, her eyes sharp behind old glasses. The room behind her smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Boxes lined one wall. File folders sat in careful stacks on a table near the window. Her gaze moved from Evan to Marin, with a rag in his hand. "I wondered when one of you would come," Alma said. Marin stiffened. "One of us?" Alma did not answer her. She looked at Evan. "Your mother's boy." Evan's throat tightened, but he held out the rag. "Found this inside a Caldwell car. That got her." Alma took the plate without touching his fingers. She carried it to the table, unfolded the rag, and turned the plate toward the morning light. For a long moment, no one spoke. Her hand hovered above the scratched mark. She did not need to ask what it was. That was what made the room feel colder. "Where exactly?" Alma asked. "Behind the engine harness," Evan said. "Hidden, but he didn't want it found unless the car came apart." Marin stepped forward. "Do you recognize the mark?" Alma gave her a look that was not rude, only tired. "I recognize too many marks." That. She went to the boxes and pulled one from the bottom shelf. The cardboard had softened at the corners. She lifted the lid carefully, like it held dishes from a dead woman's kitchen instead of paper. Inside were loose sheets, copies, payroll lists, time cards with edges worn thin from being handled too many times. Even stayed standing. Alma spread several pages across the table and put the plate beside them. Her finger moved down one column, then another. Names were not in perfect order. Some were typed. Some had been crossed through. Some had notes beside them, in a hand Evan did not know. Marin's face had gone still. "These aren't complete," Alma said. "They never were." For the closing. "Some of us kept what we could." "Why didn't you take it to court?" Marin asked. But the force had gone out of her voice. Alma looked up. "With what money, honey? Against whose lawyers?" Marin looked away first. Evan kept his eyes on the pages. He saw familiar last names, old neighborhood names, names from repair tickets in his father's ledger, names from church bulletins and yard signs, and toolboxes that had come through his shop figure. Then Alma slid one sheet closer to him. "There," she said, even read the line once. Then again, his mother's name sat in the middle of the page, not crossed out cleanly, but marked with a small notation beside it, removed from payout group. No explanation, no correction. No one's initials he could make out. The room narrowed until all he saw was that line. He had grown up hearing pieces of the story, a mother waiting for a letter that never came. His father sitting at the kitchen table late at night with envelopes open in front of him. Grown people lowering their voices when Evan walked in. He had known there had been a wrong done. Knowing was different from seeing her name treated like a clerical mistake. Marin reached toward the page, then stopped before touching it. "Evan," she said softly, folded his hands into fists and forced them open. Again. He wanted to take the stack and walk straight to the old mill grounds, wanted to put every page in front of every person who had ever said his family should let it go. But the plate alone was not enough. The copies alone were not enough. Alma's memory alone was not enough. He looked at Marin. "This came from your car." Her chin lifted, but there was fear behind it now. "My family's car, to say that where it matters." Alma closed the box halfway. "If she does, there's no putting it back." Marin's phone buzzed inside her folder. She looked at the screen, and whatever she saw pulled her face tight again. "Father," she said. Even did not ask if she meant Boyd. The name sat in the room without being spoken. They met him less than an hour later, in a private room near the site where the signing was supposed to happen. Ian, in suits, moved in and out beyond the glass, carrying folders, speaking low. The old factory land waited behind them, fenced and empty, already being discussed as if the people who had worked there had never existed. Boyd Caldwell stood at the head of the room, calm as a man greeting guests at a dinner table. "Marin," he said, "we're running behind." She held her folder against her chest. "There's a problem. There is always a problem before a closing. That is why we prepare." His eyes moved to Evan, then to Alma's box in Evan's hands. A small change passed over Boyd's face. Not surprise, not yet. Recognition held under glass. Evan saw it. Marin did too. Boyd smiled without warmth. "This is not the time to entertain old grievances." Alma flinched at that word. Evan did not. Marin opened her folder. The paper Evan had refused to sign was still inside, clean except for the grease mark. His thumb had left near the top. She looked at it, then at the older man. "You wanted the car blamed on maintenance." Boyd's voice stayed even. "I wanted a delay avoided." There was a plate hidden in it. For the first time, Boyd's eyes sharpened. Marin placed the blue plate on the table. The small scratched mark caught the room's overhead light. Alma set the copied sheets beside it. Evan stayed back, letting the objects speak before anyone could bury them under polished words. Boyd looked at Marin, not at Evan. "You do not understand what you are touching. I think I'm beginning to. You will damage this family." Marin swallowed. The room beyond the glass had gone quieter. The signing table was ready. Pens lined up, folders squared. A future built on clean language and dirty omissions. Even watched her hands. They trembled once and steadied. She picked up the agreement from her folder and tore it cleanly across the middle. Boyd's face changed then. Not much, but enough. Marin laid the torn pages on the table beside the blue plate. Signing is cancelled. No one moved. Even felt the weight of Alma's box under his arm, the names inside it, waiting like people outside a locked door. Boyd looked from the torn paper to Marin, and the calm finally left his eyes. Field. The tear in that paper seemed to travel farther than Marin's hand. It went through the private room, through the glass wall, through the waiting suits beyond it, toward the fenced-off factory land where the old building stood quiet under the gray afternoon. Boyd did not raise his voice. Men like him did not need to. He simply looked at his daughter as if she had misplaced herself. "They'll regret this," he said. Miss Farron's fingers stayed on the torn agreement. "I already do." For a moment, Evan thought she meant the signing. Then he saw where her eyes had gone. Not to Boyd, Not to the folders, feel. To the blue plate lying on the table beside Alma's old papers. The community meeting was moved into the old municipal hall before evening. Word had already spread that the sale had stalled. None. Evan walked in with Alma's box under his arm. Every row held someone who had a reason to remember the mill. Some came with canes. Some came with folded notices yellowed at the edges, family, with their hands locked tight in their laps. Ruby sat in the front row, small and silent, her bear tucked under her chin. She watched her father set the box on the table. Boyd took his place near the front with the calm posture of a man who believed rooms were made to serve him. He had 2 lawyers beside him, and a folder clean enough to look untouched by any real work. Marin stood apart from him, with Evan, not yet, but not with Boyd either. That small distance mattered. The meeting opened with polite words about redevelopment, jobs, private investment, and the future. Boyd spoke smoothly, then. He called the old mill property an opportunity. He called the objections emotional. He called the papers incomplete. He never once said the word worker. Even let him finish. Then he placed the little blue plate under the desk lamp. Came from a car owned by the Caldwell family, he said. A murmur moved through the hall. Boyd's expression did not change. A loose tag proves nothing, Boyd said. Old factories were full of scrap. Evan nodded once, as if he'd expected that. He did not argue louder. He did not pound the table. He opened Alma's box and laid the copied sheets beside the plate, one after another, careful as if each page might bruise. Alma stepped forward. Her hands shook when she adjusted her glasses, but her voice held. She explained the marks first. Not like a lawyer, someone who had spent her life watching names pass over a desk and knowing which ones would be protected and which ones would vanish. The code on the plate matched the old system used for tool assignments and payout groups. The partial lists matched shifts from the closing period. The missing pages were not enough by themselves, but the plate filled a gap that had stayed open for too many years. Boyd's lawyer began to object and spoke before he finished. The plate was hidden inside the Caldwell car. She said. The room went quiet. Boyd turned toward her, slow and sharp. Marin. She kept her eyes forward. It was found in the engine compartment. He saw it removed. The car has been in our family's possession since the mill years. I can confirm that. That was the moment Boyd lost the room. Not the sale, not the land. The room. People shifted in their chairs. Fear, a woman in the back covered her mouth. An old man near the aisle leaned forward as if he had heard his own name from a far distance. Alma took up one of the sheets and began to read. The first names came out plain, then more. Each one landed differently. Some with a gasp, some with a bowed head, some with the soft sound of someone whispering, "I knew it." Evan stood still until Alma reached his mother's name. When she said it aloud, a sound, he gripped the edge of the table. He had seen the line that morning. He had carried it in his chest all day. But hearing her name in a public room, hearing it not as a mistake or a complaint, but as part of the record, loosened something old and hard inside him. Ruby looked up at him. He did not cry. Not there. He only nodded once to Alma, and she kept reading. Boyd tried one more time. He spoke about uncertainty, about damaged records, responsible development. But the words had lost their shine. Marin placed the torn agreement beside the plate. Alma placed the payout notes beside that. Evan placed the copied list with his mother's name on top. Fail. Did not go through that night. Afterward, things moved the slow way honest things often did. The family fund removed Boyd from his position. The old transaction was open to a civil review. The redevelopment deal collapsed. Under the weight of questions, no one could smooth over anymore. The former workers and their families did not wake up rich. No one handed them a miracle. But claims were reopened, settlements were arranged, settlements were arranged, and the town finally had a record that did not pretend they had all been paid and forgotten. Marin lost the office she had been fighting so hard to keep. He came to Evan's garage only once in those first weeks, carrying no folder, no agreement, no sharp demand. She stood by the bay door and told him she had signed over copies of everything the family still held. Evan thanked her. He did not make it warm. Some debts could begin to be repaid without being forgiven. By then, the rain had passed into colder weather. One evening, then, Evan unlocked the garage after closing and let Ruby help him hang the new board on the wall beside the old customer ledger. It was simple wood, sanded smooth, with a clean sheet protected behind glass. The names were printed clearly, codes, no crossed-out lines, no notes in the margin deciding who counted and who did not. Ruby stood on a small step stool and pointed. "Is that Grandma?" Evan looked where her finger rested. "Yes," he said. "That's her." He pressed her bare against her chest and smiled, small but certain. Evan reached up, straightened the board one last time, and stepped back with his daughter beside him. The garage still smelled of oil and old metal. The roof still needed fixing. The bills would still come. But on that wall, under the soft shop light, the lost names stayed where everyone could see them.